5. Still a slow PSYOP week. Candace Owens crying wolf, claiming the French government has orders to assassinate her. Apparently, they only paid, I think, 1.5 million, or maybe it was 15. I got to check. It wasn't impressive though. She's claiming that the French government, working with Israel, were going to have her taken out because of the things that she's been saying. Too much truth. And I think this is 100% a psychological operation. She's just a walking, talking psyop at this point. And they're rebooting the post JFK notion of the conspiracy theorist when that first kind of came up. I think I think that conspiracy theories in general are part of a government controlled counterculture. There's not a single conspiracy theory out there that exists outside of the mainstream framework. It just builds on it, which is why we've defined it as MSM plus. If you look at our diagram, our Venn diagram. What's up? Do it say 9687. So I've been up late, kind of working on a project. I like to write, and I'm working on a few projects. I'm doing a update, an edit, making some corrections, and adding a couple more images to the handbook before I order as many copies as I can afford to, with the first royalty check next week. So if you wanted a signed copy of the handbook for the recently deprogrammed, I will have them likely the first week of December. I'll let you know how many I'm going to order. I'm getting authors' copies from Amazon. And again, I'm just going to go through it. See, I haven't had a chance to actually see it in person and go through it. So I relied on someone else to do some editing for me, just to kind of proofread it, to see what ChatGPT missed, and Grammarly, and my word process. Because, it's editing is one of those things where you can always miss something, and it's never quite done. It's never perfect. But there's a few things that I'm going to improve, and I'm going to order those copies. But anyway, in the meantime, I'm always working on different projects, and I've been working with Grok because I came across this alarming conclusion last night. Like, if you're a stand-up comedian, you have to realize that just like every other type of art and creative endeavor, AI is coming for you. There's going to be a point where some AI comedian is going to be funnier than all the living, breathing human comedians. And you might say, no, that's not possible. I don't know. And country music is now being dominated by AI slop. And I don't think that comedy's exempt. I really don't. So anyway, I was working on a project. I had this idea, and I'm going to publish it later today. And I'm not the author. I'm not taking credit for it. It was written by Grok. And I asked Grok to, here's how I did it. I prompted it. And I'm like, hey, can you just take or give me a list of every single conspiracy theory promoted by Candace Owens? So it gives me a breakdown of every conspiracy theory since she kind of got into podcasting. And I follow this one up with, write me. By the way, I'm sitting in my truck. I take phone calls right now. So I said, give me a script idea, an outline, where a conspiracy theory podcaster named Candy, we'll call her Conspiracy Candy, brings up each of these conspiracy theories, and it gave us an outline. And then I'm like, let's add some characters. Let's add in addition to this character Conspiracy Candy, let's add in the mix of drugs, drug fueled conspiracy theories. Maybe something kind of like Breaking Bad kind of came to mind. And it kind of ties into the name Conspiracy Candy. So here I'm just like, okay, well, who's the dealer? And immediately the first person that comes to mind, I'm thinking Breaking Bad, Jesse Pinkman, Ian Carroll. So this ebook is based on these, real people. So Ian Carroll-esque character is the dealer of this red pill substance that they're using. And then you have Q. So Q meets up with Conspiracy Candy and they join forces. Only Q turns out to be an overweight Samoan in a red Power Ranger costume, which doesn't even fit right. I mean, anyway, that's where it's going. And then this other character, and again, these are, if there's any resemblance to real people, it's obviously purely coincidental. So then there's Klanye. So Klanye, Ian, Candy, and Q uh, get together, and essentially the story, which isn't long, I don't want to take a lot of time out of people's lives for this. This is AI slop, but it's about 25 pages. It's a short story, I guess you could say, but it's following the spiraling of a podcaster into madness, which, like a mind virus, transmits to followers, her cult-like followers, and it spreads. But anyway, I said, would you write it in the style of Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club? So it kind of spat out this version of the book that I found to be kind of funny. And I might not be, right in the head for thinking it's funny, but I'm going through it as an editor. And, some of it's off, obviously, but it just really, it hit me that it's inevitable. There's going to be a point where there's going to be AI comedy and AI comedians, just total animatronics that will probably be funny, and you won't be able to not laugh at it. Like, you can pretend to be like above it, like I'm above AI art. I will never read AI slop, and you're gonna find out one of these days that you've already consumed AI stuff thinking it was real. Knight Rider says, "Love your work. You're deep in the rabbit hole most can't fathom." Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Well, we're actually outside. This is the thing. All the rabbit trails, all the mainstream conspiracy theories, never take you out of the world stage. Like, I'm suggesting that the entire conspiracy theory culture is government controlled counterculture, that it's always been controlled up. And we've gone outside of their parameters, where at their fringe, they got Candace Owens and we're beyond her. But ironically, beyond her is actually sanity. Because what they do is they give you the mainstream version, the blue pill. And if that dream doesn't satisfy you, they got something harder. It's the red pill. And the red pill takes you into a nightmare version of reality where you're not actually awake. You're having a nightmare. You never got out of the dream. We are out of their dream world. Yeah, Side Girl, I saw that. Right now, as you speak about Derek Chauvin, Jack Posobiec is out there advocating for a retrial for Derek Chauvin. And of course, like every major psyop, there's a template. They're always bifurcated left right. If you're on the right wing, your opinion is that Derek Chauvin was following protocol and George Floyd overdosed. If you're on the left, you're going to say George Floyd was killed by systemic racism and Derek Chauvin. So I'm like, wait, these things can't be both true. One of them has to be right, one of them has to be wrong. But they leave these things ambiguous so they can maintain this dialectic, this fight over the truth. So both sides agree that he died. It's just a question of who killed him. Systemic racism, exemplified by Derek Chauvin, the police, capitalism, he's defending the property class. This is all class warfare stuff. Or was he killed by fentanyl, which implies open borders, Joe Biden's fault, and I guess, and basically they're blaming the left and leftist judges probably being soft on crime and immigration, bringing in drugs. There's always a way of blaming the other side. And they're just reviving this thing for the purposes of division. The fact of it is, the third perspective is that George Floyd's not dead. George Floyd is not dead. Derek Chauvin's not in jail. Derek Chauvin probably wasn't even a cop. You know, Chauvin and Floyd worked together for years. Imagine you're working for like seven. Well, he was a security guard for no, he's a cop for 17 years, right? Or was it 19? Anyway, here we're talking about Floyd and Chauvin working together in the same nightclub, and at no point does George signify that he knows the guy that's kneeling on him. A man far 109 says woke alt-right love law and order and harder sentences. Yes, it scream free country. Yeah, that kind of seems like a contradiction to me. Where on the one hand, the far right people are like the cops don't have the right to pull you over. You know, these sovereign citizen types. Like you're infringing on my rights by telling me to put on my seatbelt. And then you see a guy being kneeled on by a cop and you side with the cop. That doesn't make sense. And I see people going to jail over their refusal to show a driver's license, acting belligerent with cops who pull them over. And yet they see George Floyd getting kneeled on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And they're like, no, I'm totally on the side of the cop and the police policies. Like, how do you explain that? Just shows you how the opinions of these demographics aren't originating from the people who are espousing these opinions. They're just a bunch of NPCs and alt NPCs. Alternative NPCs think, they imagine that they're thinking for themselves. It's all reverse psychology because like the mainstream is spoon fed and they're happy with this. They're up in their high chairs, big brothers just ladling out the propaganda and they just consume it unquestioningly. The other side is like, I don't trust the media. I got to think for myself. So they get their propaganda slop off the floor in the form of breadcrumbs. And they think since they're discovering it, since they're finding it for themselves, they believe it. So the right the far right conspiracy theorists will never believe the government. But if it's a leaked document from the government, it's true. A lot of marketing strategery here. There are consumers who will say no to everything, but if they're led to believe they discovered it, they're all about it. But as far as the PSYOP, the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin thing, Jack Posobiec bringing this up, it kind of reminds me of how, as I brought up earlier, just a couple of months ago, how the right wing has been trying to get their own martyr, like their own George Floyd. And they keep trying to do this. They've been doing this for some time. I think Austin Metcalf was meant to be their white Trayvon Martin. But they turned Charlie Kirk into a martyr for their side. And that's one of the reasons why we've got the Candace Owens thing going on. So Candace Owens is obviously an actress, and she knows that Charlie Kirk's not dead. Like, there's no reason to get mad at any of these world stage characters. Like, if you're angry and you're mad, as far as I'm concerned, you're a mind war casualty. It's like getting mad at a TV show. I mean, I can understand getting into sports a little bit, but we're looking at bread and circuses, and bread and circus clowns. And I like to keep the clowns in context. And as we've broken down the timelines of the content related to the alleged assassination of Charlie Kirk, there are so many indicators suggesting this thing was planned many years ago. And this is the only conspiracy worth considering right now. There's thousands of red pills. There's hundreds of miles of rabbit trails, all of them well paved and covered in stale breadcrumbs. You can go be a conspiracy theorist, put on your tinfoil hat, and listen to all the alt media propagandists as though you're somehow getting informed. You're not. They're not there to inform you. Their purpose is to conform you to a predetermined worldview. But if you want to pay attention to the only conspiracy worth confronting, the only real one, it's the successful ongoing conspiracy of what you could consider to be manufacturing history, fabricating our consensus worldview by inserting fake events onto our timeline. And the part that's going to be challenging for people who are still clinging to alt media orthodoxies is that these events are not only fake and nobody dies, but they're planned decades in advance. And some people will reject that and say that's too hard for me to believe. And I want to remind you that rejecting a claim because you find it hard to believe, you find it incredible, is not skepticism. Skepticism is when you examine the claim, all of the pertinent details, and you make your judgment based on those details. If you reject it without looking into it, without that vivisection, without examining all of its moving parts, then your dismissal of it is worthless. You have to actually look into it. And so my claim here is that the major historical events that we have collectively experienced on the world stage, and I'll just go back and say at least since the 60s, but I think it goes before that, have been fabricated and have been ubiquitously accepted by all media globally. All governments collude on this. So what I'm suggesting here is that these events being planned in advance is something that we can demonstrate. We can essentially prove it. We can make the case. And so if you want to refute that, I would suggest looking at our evidence, the whole history benders concept. But dismissing it out of hand is only going to cause you to remain behind. It's like we're kind of cutting edge here. We're not caught up in these rabbit trails that never take you out of this subset of the mainstream paradigm. If you want to see through the world stage and through the fakery and stop getting emotionally entangled in political theater, I would suggest looking at this notion here about the fabricated future that is being implemented, the proactive manipulation of our history. And it's a significant difference. It's qualitatively different to say the PSYOP was planned 2 years ago to gain some kind of political advantage or to influence certain demographics. It's different to say that than to say this event was planned 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It opens up a lot of questions about who would be in the know, how integrated media is, and also it would necessarily cause you to rethink what media actually is. One of the blind spots people have is not knowing that they're dealing with a pathological liar. And I wouldn't even say pathological, I'll just say a strategic liar, maybe psychopathic. But this is far beyond what people think of as propaganda, which are like limited influence operations that are geared towards influencing people now. I am suggesting something deeper because every historical event that we don't directly experience, we get through books, we get through movies, we get through however you get it, you internalize it secondhand, essentially. There's no direct experience. And one of the things they do is they employ all the tactics of marketing to get you to more or less pre-accept the premise of what it is they're going to bring out. So you feel like it's inevitable. A lot of what you could call setting your frame of reference, making you suggestible. It's a big magic show. And at this point, there's no use organizing with the alt media types or anybody who's anti on anything. You're not going to get any kind of significant numbers behind exposing this because most people have accepted the media as something that it's not. They think of the media as more or less objective. It's a bunch of competing companies with cameras and microphones and journalists running around gathering information and then transmitting it back to you. Well, they only do that most of the time. And even then, they're doing so with a built-in inherent bias because their perspective is world stage. Their perspective is guardrailed to align with Wikipedia's perspective. But there are times when beyond just going out and reporting on things, they're actively producing the events. So when we talk about fake events or psyops, it's not just a hoax. A hoax implies like a limited thing and a group of people tricked everyone. No, it's bigger than a hoax. It's a psychological operation that would necessarily require the cooperation of law enforcement as well as the media, probably, I mean, Department of Homeland Security, the hospitals, anybody who's involved with it, any agency, they would all necessarily be in the know. And what this reveals is that media is not only and when I say media, I mean, and you can't even just limit the media when we say it to news, because we're also talking about entertainment. These things are fused. But without getting into that side of it, media is an instrument of government. And at any moment, it can be employed to strategically fabricate events. And we see these things on a regular basis. And you cannot look at these things in isolation. Like someone brought up the other night, I think it was Kevin Mooring. He's like, how are these people so incredulous about Charlie Kirk's neck stopping the bullet? But the same people totally accept the idea that Donald Trump's ear deflected an AR-15 bullet and doesn't even have a scar. Like, are we in the same universe? Well, these events are not separate. So we have two timelines to think about here. You've got the mainstream version of events that's actually a fusion of two timelines. One of them is the real timeline. Like we're basically talking about objective reality as we all can experience it, verify it, and test it. Stuff we can all agree upon, like the weather, for example, the day of the week. But then you have this, and that includes obviously all the local news, the mundane stuff that actually happens. But then you have a separate timeline. And this consists of all the fake events projected into the future that will be implemented in the form of simulations, like mass casualty simulations. But these will be presented as real through the medium of uh, news reportage, where the news agencies who are reporting these events are actually part of the operation. And these fake events are not questioned by the media. And if it's a psyop that benefits the left wing, you'll notice that the right wing doesn't call out the fakery, vice versa. No, they collude in it. See, the mainstream and alt media are part of a duopoly. And the reason they maintain this, I think, is to triangulate the two primary factions. But alt media and mainstream media both agree on the essential reality of these events. That's why Candace Owens is so loud and is the number one voice in this whole thing, because they want to maintain that the alternative view is that Kirk is dead, but someone else did it. The mainstream view, Kirk is dead. Tyler Robinson did it. So you always have this split between the mainstream version and the false flag narrative. Well, the false flag narrative is baked into alt media. That's their go-to response for every single event. And what I want to point out here, there are no false flag events. The false flag narrative is always false. It's there to keep you in their frame of reference where the event was actually real as reported. That's why nobody questions Trump's ear if they're also of the belief that Kirk is dead. But this alternative timeline, or this scheduled sequence of events, historic events that will shape our worldview, uh, these two things are merged seamlessly. And so we exist in what you could term, what Baudrillard termed, the hyper reality, where the general public doesn't know the difference between real and fake, because so much of what we accept is necessarily given to us secondhand and there's no way to test it. So what we have is essentially a form of what I would consider to be secular mythology and miracles. Going through your comments. Okay. Psy Girl says something. I can't read that. BTC Pleep says, I think some truth lies in the Eastern religions. Oh, okay. Here's Psy Girl's comment. According to the Christians themselves, a truly just God should be. No. I mean, at this point, I've decided that we can no longer talk about Christians as a monolith. You cannot make generalizations about Christians. They're internally all religions are internally diverse, and there is no authority that's universally accepted. And besides, when it comes to religion in general, the topic, we're already immersed in it because we have a world state church. There is a one world religion, if you didn't notice. You can call it nasotology, but the world stage, the paradigm we live in, the hyper reality, the myth and hyperstition infused reality are augmented collective delusion. This is a Truman Show. This is the religion. This is the one world religion. It has us all, and I'll say all, I mean billions of human beings. We all exist in the same bubble. And the conspiracy theorists are in a bubble within the bubble. They never left. I mean, imagine, the Truman Show. It's an easy thing to reference because it's such a perfect, I think, allegory for what we're experiencing. If you look at everyone in this Truman Show, you have a group of people in the Truman Show hanging out in a basement, talking about how it might be fake or things might not be as they say. They're still in it. So at least they're going in the right direction. I think a lot of truthers have good intentions, but they're misled by agents in place there to misdirect them, redirect them. And in particular, the big voices in conspiracy circles in Trutherville, the Owens, the Ian Carroll, and all these types, what they're doing is, and I think this is basically part of the system, is they're taking the people who fall for the red pill conspiracy theories and leading them into political solutions, into woke right politics. And it's not an oversimplification to say that all of the popular conspiracy theories actually exist as a subset of woke right politics. And they're all part of a belief cluster. This is why I've been quarantining, because there are people who are just anti something. They have one issue they're against. But it's not like that. If you're anti or pro on any of these major issues, you're part of a cluster of beliefs, whether you know them or not. The system renders you a liar just by default. So we live in a world of lies. Everybody's responsible for what they promote. And if you don't like the word liar, I would, I don't know what to say. We have to be nuanced about this because there are conscious liars, unwitting liars. There are people who lie strategically. There are some who lie because they're just repeating lies without ever having examined what they're repeating. There are fallacious beliefs that people adopt because of vulnerabilities in their psychoepistemology. They just fall for certain fallacious types of reasoning. There are marketing strategies and influence operations that get people to believe things they shouldn't otherwise believe. So we live in a world of believers who have belief systems that are handed to them. And these belief systems are all predicated on the presumption that the mainstream media worldview is essentially true. So we live in a world of lies. So we're rendered liars by default, so you shouldn't feel bad about it. And again, a lot of us are unwitting carriers of these lies. And that's how the system is designed. So my point of it is, when it comes to these conspiracy theories, they're alt lies. They're not actually the truth. And they've just, when I say they, I mean the architects of this, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the architecture of global media, because it is global. There's only one. I mean, there's obviously many different entities and agencies, but there's only one primary point of view. And point of view is everything. If your point of view is that the mainstream media is real until proven fake, if your point of view is that the reporters are, more or less just doing reportage, that if you don't know the media is actually creating events, then your point of view is going to be in agreement with Wikipedia and ChatGPT. And these perspectives never include media fakery and news bending. So news bending The term comes from News Benders, the 1968 play about the news agencies, who are all subject to something called the Central World News Services, who have agents in every single media organization, every company, and their job is at the higher levels. The journalists are all brought in on the secret that they're manufacturing history 5 years in advance. So then this raises an important point here. Our daily news at some point becomes history. How far back? Like, how far back does news go before you call it history? What's the difference? Well, yesterday's news is technically history. It's recent history. But if we look at the history from 1960 to today, from the JFK assassination to the CK assassination, we can observably it's easy to point out. It's observably true that there's a lot of fake stuff that's not only been exposed as fake by a lot of people, but it's been carved into stone that the establishment accepts these things as true, no matter what the so-called conspiracy theorists say. So now we're talking about all these major events every so often that are projected into the mass consciousness. And the news bending is where these events become the central point of focus for the population, whatever's being spotlit. But also, all the real news bounces off the fake news, treating it as real. And this has an effect of steering the news cycles. That's why we say news bending. And when you look at this news bending process in the timeline over the years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it actually has an effect of bending the entire timeline. So I say history bending is how we should look at it. So if you're living in the worldview that has been bent for decades, then you cannot consider yourself to be living in objective reality. Just like you wouldn't say that somebody who's in a cult, some doomsday cult living in a bunker, is an objective reality. No, they're in a closed informational system. Mainstream media and the worldview it broadcasts is essentially a closed informational system. It's closed to the extent that it doesn't allow the point of view that we describe here. I mean, the alt media is not really an alternative point of view. It is the controlled opposition, and it's an intentionally created dialectic. They want this left and right split. That's why every issue is perfectly bifurcated. And the reason why is that the left and the right side of the political horseshoe are being triangulated. So the media promotes the mainstream vision, and these two sides fight over it. But there's a triangulation involved here, where the media obviously favors the left. It favors, and the left is, of course, very much in favor of the establishment and pro-government side, whereas the conspiracy theorists fall to the right. BTC says every major event recorded has been simulated. Yeah, let's qualify. The word simulated has various connotations, but we're talking about like a movie, and any movie you watch is a simulation. It's people pretending. Every drill is a simulation. A psychological operation is just a simulated event treated as real. And these simulations are superimposed over the real thing. And they're internalized by the news consumers. But there's phases to this because they need you to internalize the significant historic events that put our lives into a context that we all agree upon. So you have the predictive content or predictive programming. And this is something that's built into every one of these fake events. It's structural. The fakery is systemic. We point out the structure with every fake event. So every fake event that you live through, that you internalize as real, has been preceded by content in the media getting you to confront it in advance, like you get advertised to in advance of purchasing a product. So you can look at this predictive content as, in many ways, product placement for future fake events. So you've got the predictive stuff. But then when the event happens, the media ecosystem around those who are targeted with the fake event, with the psychological operation, The media environment is saturated with the theme, with versions of the event in the movies that are happening at the same time. So the propaganda intensifies when the event happens. This was especially pronounced during the Charlie Kirk event, where I could point out numerous ways that the theme of the event was visible in entertainment, in the podcasts, even in the sports. And the same memes are being forced out there onto the zeitgeist. But then after the event, so you got predictive, concurrent, then you have reinforcement programming. The reinforcement is the reaction within the mainstream and alternative ecosystems that just amplify that the event happened. So since that day, Candace Owens has been doing nothing but amplifying the essential myth. He's dead. He got killed. Somebody did it. But at no point in any of her conspiracy ramblings has she come across or even confronted seriously the idea that Kirk's not dead. Because their whole objective here, their entire objective, is maintaining the integrity of the historical event. John Francis says, I call the Earth a jagged rock, neither flat nor round. Well, the idea of the Earth shape was always misdirection from worldview and how you get that. They've always distracted people. But, these debates aren't even serious. The people who are anti-flat Earth are believers in all the mainstream media. And I would even go so far as to say that flat earther is a misnomer. It's a media designation meant to discredit people who are essentially acting skeptical toward NASA. And I was a little disappointed, but not surprised to see Jeranism turn against his former audience, the flat earthers. He's like, oh, you people are all dumb, just insulting them. I'm like, don't you get it? The only reason that they even confronted this topic is because they became skeptical about media and were willing to contemplate fakery on a global scale. Whatever the conclusion, they're approaching it in the right direction. And if you want to find where the true skeptics are, who aren't adhering to the alt media, you're going to find them there. The people who are willing to hit a reset button and consider the possibility that they've been wrong about everything and lied to fundamentally. The fact of it is they're true, they're accurate. We have been lied to about the world, but we've been lied to about our history as well, and what the worldview that we have is. You could look at is it's a false model. Now, what's behind the lies? I don't know. There's known unknowns. We don't have all the answers, but we know that if you accept a false explanation and you become a believer in a false explanation, you have no incentive to continue to seek or look beyond it. And I say it's actually rational to be a non-believer in this day and age. And you can qualify this by saying, I don't believe it because of this additional information. You believe it despite the lack of information, which makes you a faithful believer in media, and it makes me not just an agnostic, but an informed disbeliever. And it's useful to point out that the disbelievers, from our perspective, have more information than the believers. So it's like, oh, you believe these headlines that were spoon fed to you, but I reject them, and I have these 15 hoax indicators and a dozen other reasons why I don't believe it. So the burden of proof is not on us, it's on the media, but it's also on the media advocates. So if somebody's defaulting to the mainstream perspective and you're saying, hey, this event's completely fabricated, and they say it's real, well, their basis for saying it's real is weak. They would have to confront all of your hoax indicators. If they're not willing to do their due diligence, then their opinions can be disregarded. Like, I'm rejecting the media lies for these reasons. If you're just going to repeat media lies, you're just kind of a liar. You're a propaganda mule at best. At worst, you're, I don't know. I mean, There's no malice behind it. A lot of people defend it because their identity is wrapped up in it. I mean, it's going to be really hard to pull a lot of truthers out of politics. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me when Trump emerged onto the scene was a lot of conspiracy theorists who had gone so far as to question NASA's content, their ridiculous science fiction, got absorbed back into politics. And they would tell me, well, Donald Trump believes all the conspiracies and he's going to defeat the deep state for us. So it was a cool sales pitch. You validate the conspiracy theorist fringe, like, hey, you guys are right. There is a deep state and all these bad things are happening, but we're going to stop it. But what we're doing here with the IPS think tank is we're confronting the barriers, keeping those conspiracy theorists who are still in the Truman Show from exiting the duopoly, the controlled paradigm. And I just refer to these as guardrails. Guardrails are the alternative explanations that keep the free thinkers from exiting the controlled, the closed informational system. So, getting back to the shape of the Earth question, the more relevant question is, are we in a closed or open system in terms of information and how we get our worldview? Well, we're in a closed system. We're in a closed informational system. And the same goes for the news. So it's the shape of the world, but also our internal concept, the you could consider the psychological simulation. And the thing about it is that it's collectively agreed upon. There are more people who agree with the Wikipedia version of reality that we live in than don't. And when I say Wikipedia, I mean the approved consensus version. And then there is this perception, there's this idea that conspiracy theorists are actually censored. They're not. Because if they're acknowledged by the system, then they're being triangulated against. Then they're part of this bifurcated system. So if it's being called out, like, oh, here are the people, the QAnon people, or here are the anti-Semitic people, or here are the fill in the blank conspiracy theorists, the anti-vaxxers, or the people who are anti-geoengineering. You have all these conspiracy theories who, the misinformation types who get banned. Well, they're getting banned from the platforms, but they're being acknowledged. Their ideas are being spread, and they're being given legitimacy by the fact that the mainstream media is confronting them and trying to censor them. So you can't say, for example, oh, Candace Owens was censored by the Daily Wire because of her opinions on Israel. What do you mean censored? She's the number one podcast in the world. Alex Jones is being censored because he's telling the truth. Um, he's the most popular alternative media personality out there. What do you mean censored? So instead of censored, you have to look at it in terms of acknowledged or unacknowledged. So I don't consider the off-world stage perspective. I don't consider the IPS to be censored. We're not censored because we're not even acknowledged. We have this perspective that they cannot confront. They do not want this third perspective. They don't want an alternative to their mainstream and alt duopoly. So what we're doing here is we're intentionally creating a platform for this third perspective to emerge. And we are it right now. This think tank is it because we are all in agreement on the basic premise here that the world stage is built upon many decades of news bending and therefore history bending. That informs our perspective about current events. We're also informed about media fakery and what's possible in terms of fakery. And it's getting even better. I was on Twitter this morning and I saw this video of this big black wolf who was like almost drowning because the ice had broken. He was on this frozen lake. And this guy's out there and he's pulling the wolf out of the water. And then it can't even run. It's got like hypothermia. So he takes it to a vet. He puts it in his truck. He turns on the heater, warms it up, and he drives the wolf to the vet to get its lungs checked. And then he ends up going home with this big black wolf. He feeds it some of his sandwich. It looks at him. It knows it's safe. And then he lets it go back into the woods. And all kinds of people in the comments are crying over this big black wolf that has been rescued by this man. And someone pointed out, well, notice how the wolf's eyes have changed. And it turns out that it was AI. There are people shedding tears in large groups over AI generated pet or animal rescue videos. Animal rescue videos is a genre now. Like I should do one. Man rescues a penguin from a something. I don't know. You can do anything, and people will believe it. A burning house. Yeah, this guy's rescuing a penguin from a burning house. And the thing is, we're entering in. We've already entered. We've already passed the point of no return. And I said this was going to happen. I said we're going to reach a point where the media fakery is going to get so good that it's going to constitute a new illiteracy. Because you can look at how illiteracy historically has been a way of maintaining a power disparity. If you have an educated, literate elite and then illiterate masses, well, their minds are putty in your hands. And the movable type press represented this shock to the system. You have this information revolution where information can now be spread without the bottlenecking of the priesthood. And the internet seemed to promise the same thing. But what does it mean if people can no longer tell real from fake and most of the information we get is visual, not textual? Because the visual, it's almost like fast talking, where you can't really process all the words of somebody's fast talking. Well, if you're getting all this imagery downloaded into your consciousness and you're not parsing it, real or fake, because you assume it's just real, because you assume cameras are objective, well, then you've been rendered essentially illiterate in a whole new way. And we're predominantly getting our worldview from visual stimuli, not what we're reading, but what we're seeing on the screens. So I'm saying here is that we have been collectively hoodwinked. We've been put back into a dark age. Our minds are putty in the hands of the power elite who have a monopoly on worldview itself. We're living in their movie. Now, is this an infringement? Is this I don't know, a dystopia? Anonymous says, what happened to the 3-eye atlas nonsense I haven't heard about? Yeah, you know what? I did a meme about 2 weeks ago of these hamburger buns in space, big giant hamburger buns just passing by the Earth. And I labeled it 3-eye atlas, just to suggest that there's a big nothing burger up there if you care to look. Now, I do have my fingers crossed. I kind of hope that Apophis 99942 is real. That's the planet killer named for the god of chaos that's supposed to hit the Earth on April 29th, 2029, I believe. I know it's a Friday the 13th, but it's gonna kill us all. I hope that one's real. Now, it's possible that they could fake something to that extent. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna play it off, but I mean, we've been getting this is something else we've been doing. You can get an idea of what's to come by looking at what the programming is suggesting, because they saturate the minds of the masses with the ideas, with the context for the psyop to come. They plant the seeds. Again, it's predictive, then it's concurrent, then it's reinforcement programming. So you can look at the predictive and concurrent programming to get an idea of what we're being softened up for. And it seems like meteor strikes, blackouts, it's all in the works. Somebody said the latest Paw Patrol movie, and I've never watched it. I think it's about dog police. That one has something about a meteor strike. Now they plant ideas in advance. They seed the ideas just like marketing. It's all strategic. Entertainment is a form. It's a branch of government. It's getting you to accept the reality you're being presented with. That's why it all goes down without a hitch. It seems like a logical consequence. And for the longest time, this area of discourse has been dismissed because people would just say, oh, these are just coincidences. And it seems like no one has a harder time with this than truthers. When you tell them, hey, did you know that the entertainment media is just as complicit in the psychological warfare as the news media. It's like, why is that challenging? You accept that the news media is hoard out to government for the purposes of exploiting these blind spots in the masses when it comes to news media and how we get our worldview, and we don't even have the ability to critically process it. But why is it a stretch to consider that the entertainment's doing the same thing? It's absolutely true. And again, you can dismiss it without examining our evidence, or you can just call our evidence coincidence and look away. But the facts don't care about your feelings, your personal incredulity. And we have been on point with this as a think tank for years, consistently making predictions based on our model. Hey, by the way, if this Charlie Kirk thing is fake, we're going to see A, B, and C. Concurrent programming, predictive programming, and drills. And we have other hoax indicators. And yeah, we checked all the boxes on this one, including the ready-made political agendas attached to it and the left-right division over it. The predictive stuff even included South Park. So many people said, I never heard about Charlie Kirk until South Park. Well, what do you think they put him on South Park for? They had to place him there. That way he's in your frame of reference. You associate him with Cartman, who's the KKK racist Hitler character. And then you take him out. And now you see all these lefties who love South Park cheering for the death of Charlie Kirk. I mean, I've never seen so many people celebrating an assassination. I mean, I don't think people celebrated JFK's assassination, did they? I mean, we celebrate assassinations now, apparently, in this country. And then it gets okay again to kill CEOs. Like, whenever there's a lot of deaths reported in the news, I'm always like, well, before you guys get mad, it's a mass shooting, but make sure those people killed weren't CEOs. Because if that's your standard, that CEOs deserve death, then don't react to the deaths until you find out that the people, didn't actually deserve it. I never cheer on anybody's death. I want even the people I don't like, I want them to be around long enough for me to get my revenge. I mean, who wants people to die? That's just psychotic. And that tells you something about media and how similar it is to religion. What is it Voltaire said about this? If you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. There's some kind of relationship you made there, and there's something to it, because you hear about religions, like religions say, stone the non-believer, set them on fire, you know, throw them off the roof. You have all these different ways that religions deal with the non-conformists, how they kill the smart people, because that's what religions do. They kill off the intellect. But mainstream media is doing the same thing. And you can look at it as a religion. I'm an alien, and having just arrived here, looking around, I don't know the difference between news and entertainment. People look the same when they consume it. There's no difference in their brain waves, their brain activity. They're processing it the same way. To me, it makes sense. As an alien who's not involved with humanity, it makes sense that what we're seeing globally is the religion, that the church is media. And that's why you have all these traditional religious motifs superimposed over mainstream entertainment. That's why you have constructs like aliens, which are really just angels for the atheists. They've reintroduced all these archaic concepts through the medium of science fiction. And that's because it's all about creating a uniform paradigm. So when I see people at the extremes gleefully cheering on the death of the other side, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's just religion as usual. Like, that's not a normal reaction. That's not reasonable. Oh, I mean, there were people wearing Halloween costumes where they're playing, dead Charlie Kirk. And look, I know Charlie Kirk is not 6 feet under. He's snorkeling in New Zealand, wherever he's at. He's not dead. Candace Owens knows this. Like, we're not operating on the premise that he's dead. Like, we're not foolish here. That's why we need this third platform, because every alternative platform out there is mad about his death. They're crying about his death. We're not there. We're not in their fictional universe. But even knowing that he's not dead, the idea of celebrating this death is still reprehensible. Truman B says Doge has been shut down. If it was even real in the first place, just another Musk mass media psyop. Yeah, no doubt. Well, you'll notice that Doge, the government cuts, are blamed for everything that goes wrong now by the left. Like when that helicopter was hit by the plane. Yeah, you notice that? So Candace Owens claims that the French government and Israel were trying to assassinate her, and they killed Kirk to get her to stop talking about the French president's wife possibly being his father. I mean, it's so convoluted at this point by design. It's hard to get a solid grasp on what she's actually saying. But she filed a report with the White House that a foreign government has threatened to assassinate her. And so she's taking a week off to deal with this. So she filed a report. Dark Ghost Wind says, I guess Candace is the stand-in for Laura Jennings. Yeah, I said this last year after watching The Madness, which predicted the emergence of Musk as this influential political figure connected to the president. You know, we've seen this before. This was in The Madness. And in The Madness, Laura Jennings, who seemed to be based on Laura Loomer, is this conspiracy theorist patriot who gets out of hand, inconveniently brings up things that threaten certain billionaires, and they end up taking her out. And I said, well, Laura Loomer is probably going to go. Laura Jennings, Laura Loomer, same character. But in the last 6 months, it seems like Loomer has distanced herself from conspiracy theories, which they want to keep on the woke right side, because there's a split on the right. It's neocon, pro-Israel, anti-Islam, and then it's woke right, anti-Israel. And the woke right, anti-Israel side is where the conspiracies are. Laura Loomer is anti-Islam, pro-Israel, neocon. So she can't actually play that role. So it makes sense that they would have to pass it on to Candace Owens. Are they going to take her out? I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, I look at this now as it's more likely that she's being amplified so she can replace Alex Jones and David Icke. Like, they need somebody to inhabit that particular area of discourse. She's the perfect bridge between red pills and J pill, from conspiracy theory to woke right politics. So her position is very important in their structure, and they're not going to just get rid of her. Not to mention, her job is to corral all these conspiracy theorists into a predictable series of alternative narratives. I mean, look, we're just dealing with propagandists. Anonymous says, I am a fan of Conspiracy Candace the same way I'm a fan of fictional characters. Yes. Commenter says, Don Lemon gifted me a membership. I didn't see that. If you haven't seen The Madness, though, the main character, Munchie, is based on Don Lemon. The leader of the Forge, Brother 14, seems to be based on Nick Fuentes. And there was an assassination attempt on Fuentes. Then there's this tech billionaire who helped steal the election by platforming Nazis on his social media. That's based on Musk, and he gets killed at the end by it's like Luigi Mangione stepped out of The Madness. And one of the themes here is that the killer of the CEO is able to walk around the hood and nobody turns him in. They protect him, which was a common sentiment regarding Luigi Mangione, where there are so many people who are like, if only he had escaped, we'd hide him in Seattle. I mean, I found a lot of conjecture because he was this folk hero, like Robin Hood or the Joker. But anyway, I'm going to get back in continue to work on my project. So again, Grok wrote it. I'm not taking credit for it. I'm just the editor. Grok wrote me a 25-page short story called short novella, Conspiracy Candy, and it's loosely based on, well, no, it's coincidentally might resemble Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, Q, and Kanye. Kanye might just, it's just coincidental, of course. But the premise of it is, well, you'll see. It's written in the style of Chuck Palahniuk, the guy who wrote Fight Club. I was just playing around with AI, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't actually as bad as it used to be. Like, what happens when the AI slop is no longer slop? What if it becomes human slop by comparison? What's going to happen when Grok comedians or AI comedians are funnier than real people? Like, if you can get your comedy, you actually laugh to tears over some AI generated content. I mean, you might feel guilty at first, but we're being replaced. I don't know what that means. You can't stop it though. I'm kind of an accelerationist. I feel like you should just push it, stress test it, break it if you have to, but just push it as far as it can go and then let it correct itself later. Yeah, Klanya, you got to see the cover. So the cover art, so the Ian Carroll character looks like Shaggy, but he's got bug eyes. Candace looks like Candace. Q is a overweight Samoan in a tight Power Ranger costume. No, it's actually armor. It's a real armor. And the Kanye character, it looks like Kanye, but he's wearing a black dunce cap to kind of signify like a Klansman. I should put, cause I'm using AI to generate this art. I should put a tinfoil dunce cap on. No, I don't know. We'll see. You got to see the cover art. Let me know what you think. But anyway, I have it written in the style of Chuck Palahniuk. I hope I'm saying his name right, because he's known for this type of content. And when I say this type of content, it's about so it's a combination like Breaking Bad, some Breaking Bad elements to it. But you'll see. I am going to be publishing it later today, and you know what I'm going to do is I'll send the PDF to subscribers. So if you're subscribed, you'll get a PDF. You can read it. I would appreciate the reviews, and I'm going to put it on Amazon. And I'm just doing it for fun. I think AI is fun. I think it's entertaining. It's educational. I mean, it really is. You can learn a lot. There are some things to it that, as a writer, you can't really turn this down at this point. Like, it's a major advantage. Because, for example, I'm not saying it should write for you, but you can treat it as an editor, and you can get some very good, valid feedback. All right, we'll be live later today to take calls, etc. By the way, I have some auctions, some art auctions ending in about an hour. So if you go to timosmond.art, it'll give you a link to the eBay store. I've been putting a lot of my time into art, but I took the night off just to work on some writing. And again, I'm doing a bit of editing on the handbook for the recently deprogrammed. I'm going to order a certain number of copies in a few days. I'm not sure how many, but I'm actually going to get physical copies in my hands that I can sign so I can work on the promotion and hopefully move into the next phase. The next phase, which involves a 45-minute whiteboard discussion and explanation of the basic concepts here and referencing the book and the philosophical framework that it provides for looking at media as a skeptic in an active way, as an informed non-believer, which I think is essential if you want to be objective and sane in an increasingly subjective and insane world. And don't tell me it's not insane or that this is hyperbole when you've got a bunch of people running around celebrating some guy getting shot in the neck. What's up, Clockwork 113 says some cool art, Tim. Hey, thanks. Yeah, the new one I did is Aliens in the Desert of New Mexico. It's done with these acrylic markers, which I didn't know existed. It almost feels like cheating. It's so easy to paint with markers. Then I painted a grasshopper that I found, and a few other random things you'll see if you go to the Tim